Okay, hello, it's 6 o'clock, and I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all. Thank you for coming. I'm Linnell Stevens, and I'm Director of Development and Special Events at Village Preservation, and I'm really glad you are all here with us this evening. Just a quick bit about Village Preservation. We've been documenting, celebrating, and fighting for the preservation of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo since 1980. We work to expand and extend landmark and zoning protections and stop inappropriate development while also encouraging appropriate development in our neighborhoods. We host roughly 75 programs a year, most of which are free and open to the public. Our events are meant to illuminate the cultural and architectural heritage, history, and depth and the value of preservation, and of course, supporting small businesses in our communities. We are a nonprofit, membership-based organization, so your involvement and your support really do mean the world to us. And won't you please consider becoming a member or making a donation if you're able to. You can go to villagepreservation.org/donate. Get involved. I think we've put that in the chat there. Thank you, Sam, my trusty assistant, Sam. Actually, he's our Director of Operations, and he's helping us out tonight. So now, just a bit of Zoom protocol. I'm not going to be visible during the talk, but I'll be here. So please feel free to just chat and say hi. Tell us where you're joining from or raise any issues or thoughts. And if you have any questions for our speakers specifically, just use the Q&A function. It helps us to keep track of them. And you can do that at any point during the talk. And we'll get to as many of the questions as we can during the presentation. So I am really, really delighted tonight to introduce tonight's speakers. What began as a really whimsical idea, crisscrossing the side streets of Manhattan, quickly developed into Betsy Polivy's Manhattan Sideways. Having owned and operated a children's bookstore for 10 years, Betsy is passionate about the need to recognize and promote small businesses. Her first book, Walking Manhattan Sideways, came out in 2020 to great acclaim, and now we are celebrating the publication of Betsy's second book, The Art of Walking Manhattan Sideways. You can purchase that today at the link that we're putting into the chat right now. And trusty Sam, greetings from Arizona from Chris. Thank you, Chris. Sam's going to put the Manhattan Sideways link into the chat now. We're really glad to welcome two representatives of the small businesses here in New York that are featured in Betsy's book and that exemplify the eclectic and sustaining businesses in our neighborhoods. Mitchell Banchik is the owner of the bar Down the Hatch, the first of his now many around the city, which is celebrating 30 years as a mainstay for revelers on West 4th Street. Welcome. And Chandra Jo Scamato is the former director and longtime teacher, board member, and champion of Integral Yoga, which teaches simple and profound practices of yoga and more on West 13th Street. So thank you all very, very much for being here with us. And I am going to turn this evening over to Betsy. Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you. Thanks, Linnell. Thanks, Sam, for everything that you've been doing as well to help us out. I am delighted to be back. This time we have a bit of a slideshow for you, some wonderful photographs from both books, Walking Manhattan Sideways and The Art of Walking Manhattan Sideways. So I'm not sure, obviously, how many of you have heard me speak before, so I don't want to make you listen to my same story again. So I'm just going to do a quick overview, add a little bit perhaps to what Linnell just shared with you. And then let's have Mitchell and Chandra speak for a bit, and then we'll answer questions and we can engage in any kind of conversation that the audience would like. So back in 2011, as Linnell said, I began walking, and for 6 years, I walked every single street of the original Manhattan grid, which is from First Street to 155th, from river to river. And I documented every single place on every street and went inside and met all the business owners or people working there, heard the stories. I had phenomenal photographers, as you'll be able to see from these photos, who walked with me as well. And the website was absolutely fabulous, and it went street by street for 6 years, and it is still today. New York's sideways.nyc is the website. And I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to write a book. I had owned a children's bookstore. My mom is an award-winning author. But when COVID hit, the urgency just was there for me, and the motivation was there. And I just wanted to help these small business owners. And everything I've done since 2011 is my desire to want to help promote, support, celebrate the small businesses. And so I wrote and self-published Walking Manhattan Sideways. I got it out in 6 months. And in my wildest dreams, I never expected it to do as well as it had. And people kept asking me, was there enough to do a second? Would I do a second? And I always wanted to write about the arts in all its forms: music, dance, theater, galleries, museums, as well as the not-for-profits, which go under the radar, but there's so many that are fantastic and have wonderful stories. And I wanted to tell those, as well as having walked into every single place of worship, be it churches, synagogues, mosques, temples. I just was so blown away on every street, and I just felt nobody knew about these. People come to New York, and as they should, they visit St. Pat's, and but I just want you all to know that there's so much more out there that date back hundreds of years. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to sacred spaces. And so the motivation behind everything is to get people off the avenues. And if you live on the Upper East Side, that you go to Harlem, that you go to the Upper West Side, that you go to the Village, you go to the East Village. Just get out of your comfort zone and visit other places and walk on the side streets and go into these businesses and say hello and introduce yourself and meet these incredible people and hear their stories and in how they've, as I say, survived the test of time. So now I'm happy to do a quick pause if there's any comments or questions before I keep going that you would like me to answer or address. Linnell, I kind of leave that to you to tell me yes, no, keep going.
Sorry there, Betsy. No questions at the moment.
Okay, great.
Just a lot of hellos. Really, really happy.
Thank you. So, I mean, I could spend the whole hour obviously talking about all these wonderful people and businesses that I spent time in, but I'm just going to tell one. Ariel, who has always organized these Zoom events, and I'm sure you all know her name, and she's not able to be here with us this evening, but when I was chatting with her and I was telling her about certain places, she said, oh, Betsy, please make sure that you share this. So it's not in the Village area, but it's just so relevant to what your organization stands for. Nicholas Roerich, Roerich, at 319 West 107th Street. And this was one of my truly special discoveries because it's just a brownstone on a beautiful street with a tiny little sign. And it's a gallery, it's a museum, it's not a gallery. And it's pays tribute to this artist who was born in Russia in the early 1900s. And they opened this museum for him in 1949. So he was an artist, a painter. He's painted thousands of landscape paintings. He traveled a lot, spent a lot of time in the Himalayas. He came to New York and spent time here and traveled in the US. But what impacted me the most about him is he was committed to cultural preservation. And this was important to him in the 1920s. And he drafted what was called the Roerich Pact, and it was intended to protect monuments and institutions during wartime around the world. And then that led, if anybody is aware of this, to the creation of what's called the Banner of Peace. And it's a white background with 3 conjoined red circles, and that it hangs at all cultural centers, declaring them neutral territories. So he always recognized the need to protect these amazing places. And when he traveled around Russia, that was where it first hit him. And he went to some more obscure areas at the time, and he said, don't let anything happen to these. And so he committed his life to this, as well as being a magnificent painter. And the people who run the museum are so lovely to meet them and spend time there. I just would encourage you. So now I'm going to stop so you don't have to listen to me anymore, and I come back later and tell you some stories. I think a little bit of conversation about COVID might be appropriate, and Chandra and Mitchell can certainly speak to that. And as you're looking through and seeing all these beautiful photographs, if you want to make note or put in the chat room and would like to know more about any of them, of course, I'm happy to tell you. And you're seeing all these beautiful pictures of the birds and the flowers, and it's all in Central Park. And because it was my book and I could do whatever I wanted, which was really fun, all the photographers who worked with me, I always told them how they should go to Central Park, whatever the season, and have fun. And it's just the perfect place to take photographs. And so then I had so many beautiful ones, and there are over 50,000 photographs on our website. But we have a, there's a section of the website devoted to Central Park. So I just had pulled some and did a 2-page spread on the website. So when you see those pictures, don't be confused, that's why they're there. Okay, so Chandra, I will start with you. As Linnell said, you've been the director for quite some time at Integral Yoga. When I first reached out and had the pleasure of speaking with you, I was so taken, and it ended up that we were on the phone for over an hour, where she shared the whole history of how integral yoga came to be. And I was so fascinated by it, and I couldn't obviously tell your whole story in a book, but we did our best. And if I just do a little background, because I knew Peter Max, who was a German American. He was born in Germany and then lived in several countries before he settled in the US, and actually in Brooklyn, and became a highly acclaimed artist. And then he was invited to France to be a director for a film that they were making about, Chandra, you can correct me anytime if I'm wrong. But they were putting together a film for spiritual leaders, and he was brought over to Paris to help with this. And that's where he met the Swami, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. And thus he brought him to the United States. This gentleman, the Swamis, spoke at Woodstock, which I love. And integral yoga grew out of all of this. So it's quite a history, which now, Chandra, I hope I did an okay intro for you, and please share as much as you can from there.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Betsy. And you definitely got all of those pieces of information straight. The Swami's name is Swami Satchidananda. And the story is that Peter Max happened to be invited to Paris in 1966 to work on this film. At first, he wasn't able to go, but then through the magic of yoga, the magic of New York, the beautiful story of integral yoga happened because he did agree to go to Paris. So in Paris, he not only met Swami Satchidananda, but studied with him for a few weeks. Swami Satchidananda, a Swami, a monk in the yogic tradition, he was a yoga master and had studied the 5,000-year lineage of yoga. He had been running an ashram in Sri Lanka at the time called Ceylon. But in the few weeks that Peter Max spent learning yoga, meditation, yoga philosophy, questioning the meaning of life, he was so taken by Swami Satchidananda, by these teachings, and mostly how this practice made him feel. It was 1966. There were people searching for meaning, searching for purpose, searching to feel good. But as Peter Max told Swami Satchidananda, he said, "You need to come to America." And the Swami said, "Why?" And Peter Max said, "Because our people need you." And again, the Swami said, "What do they need me for?" And Peter said, "Everybody is looking to feel like I feel now. And they're taking drugs and they're drinking and they're getting crazy and all kinds of things. But what I have felt here is something I never felt before." And so the Swami agreed. And in July of 1966, he arrived in America. He began speaking to and teaching yoga to all of Peter's friends. Now, as Betsy points out, Peter was a very accomplished artist and worked in the marketing and advertising field. So his friends were artists, musicians, illustrators, and art directors. And Swami Satchidananda basically told them, "I can show you how to feel high all the time without hangovers or adverse effects." And so they learned about yoga poses and breathing practices and meditation. They learned about searching for peace inside rather than outside. As Swami Satchidananda said, "You can't change the world until you change yourself. And you can't have peace by fighting. So find the peace in yourself and become an instrument of peace." And this resonated so much, and more people kept coming first to Peter's house on Riverside Drive, then to the Oliver Cromwell Hotel where they rented some rooms. Then these overflow crowds continued throughout July and August and September of 1966. The Swami spoke at the Universalist Church on Central Park West. And finally, on October 7th of 1966, this small, intrepid group of New Yorkers rented an apartment at 500 West End Avenue and filed the papers to found the nonprofit Integral Yoga Institute, dedicated to the teachings of Swami Satchidananda and integral yoga. The name was chosen because integral yoga integrates all aspects of the individual, your body, breath, mind, life, service, as well as all different branches of yoga. In this apartment, this big Upper West Side apartment, people came every day. Teachers were trained in a very rudimentary way. Yoga classes took place. The Swami spoke at the church on Friday nights. And it just grew and grew and grew. And more people discovered how good they could feel. And so throughout 1967 and 68, this just continued. There were talks and events. There were some retreats in summer camps upstate. But in 1969, two amazing things happened. In January, the Integral Yogis rented Carnegie Hall and held a yoga demonstration and talk with Swami Satchidananda. It was standing room only. He was on the stage with his students, demonstrating while they practiced and talking about yoga. This led to another event in August of 1969, the Woodstock Festival. As we know, that festival started out expecting 50,000 people. That's how many tickets they printed. But it grew and grew and grew and grew, and more people were coming. And so the organizers did two very smart things. They made it free. They took down the fences. They let everybody in. and they invited Swami Satchidananda to give an opening talk. They brought him up the thruway in a car until the thruway was so completely packed that they couldn't do it, and then they sent a helicopter for him. He arrived on the stage at Woodstock. There's a picture of our shop on the screen right now. He arrived at the site in Bethel Woods of the Woodstock Festival, and they said, "Will you speak now?" And he said, "Well, let them hear a little music first." So Richie Havens came on and played for a while. He was Swami Satchidananda's opening act. But when Swami Satchidananda took the stage, he said to everyone there, "The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching the youth of America and to see what you can do. The success of this event is in your hands." And they chanted together, and many people credit him with setting a certain tone that resulted in those 4 days of peace and music. So here's where the West Village comes in. After Woodstock, interest in integral yoga and Swami Satchidananda just exploded. More and more and more and more people. It was no longer possible to be in this apartment. So they started to look for a building. And they looked all over New York until they found 227 West 13th Street. Now, at that time in 1970, the LGBT Center was an abandoned school. Jackson Square Park was what was called Needle Park, a lot of drug addicts. The West Village was not the fancy place it is now. But the building had housed artists, including James Ratto, who wrote the musical Hair. I don't know if I pronounced his last name correctly, but you know who I mean. Anyway, the many subway stops nearby and all of it, so Integral Yoga bought the building and dedicated it in October of 1970 and has been there ever since, training teachers, creating all kinds of programs to make yoga available to everyone. That's the mission of Integral Yoga. It is for every body, of every age, of every size and shape, of every physical condition, of every color, culture, faith, and background, of every gender, of everything. And the way the class is structured is still the same as it always was: very accessible, easeful, yet deep practice. And it's not just yoga poses, it's breathing, it's meditation, it's relaxation, and it's also, as his original teachings, understanding the mind, so that we are always seeking to be peaceful and to be of service to the world. If the website address could be put in the chat, Betsy, you'll tell me if I'm talking too long. I do want to let you know that the Institute is now open. On Friday, March 13th of 2020, we had to close the doors due to COVID. And it was very shocking, as we all know. There was a teacher training going on. We're always training yoga teachers. They met in a classroom on Friday in the building, and on Monday, they met on Zoom. We held our last class on Friday at 5 o'clock, and the following Monday, it did take us 10 days, but by the following Monday, we had 40 classes a week on Zoom. And that's been going on all this time. And in the last few months, the building opened up again. And we now have about 14 in-person classes a week. Again, students must be vaccinated. Everyone must wear masks. I've been teaching again on site. It's a challenge, but to be together in one room, you know, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And being away for so long and now being back is just amazing. So visit the website. Every Friday night at 5 o'clock, there's a free Zoom guided relaxation, and every Sunday at 7, a free introductory Zoom class. We are a nonprofit. Since its founding in New York, integral yoga has spread all over the world. There are centers and teachers on 6 of the 7 continents. So visit the website and take a class. If you've done yoga before, you will find this a very profound practice. And if you've never done yoga, you will find it a comfortable and welcoming practice too. So thank you. We say Om Shanti, Namaste, Om Peace.
Wow, that was perfect. That was
Oh,
amazing. That to be able to tell that whole story so beautifully and so quickly, basically. You got all the important details. And you did mention how there was a photo of the shop. The shop is just lovely. So even if you're not taking yoga classes, I do recommend just going there. And you have a lovely section devoted to women who are pregnant. And then there's all kinds of beautiful scents and candles and lots of books and clothing. And am I leaving anything out that's important? Sorry.
No, it's a beautiful, welcoming place and lovely items. So yeah, come in and visit. Very welcoming and happy. Just celebrated 55 years of existence, and last year 50 years on West 13th Street.
Pretty amazing. So does anybody have any questions or comments? First for Chandra before we move on, but I saw in the chat that somebody was saying they were having difficulty understanding us. So have we corrected that? Are you okay? Or do you need us to do something so that you can all hear us better? Someone could unmute and tell me, that would be great.
I think we're doing all right. Thank you, Betsy.
Okay, sure. And so, Linnell, are there any other questions or comments that we'd like to have right now?
No, not at the moment. I just wanted to say back to really quickly, I'll ask you more questions later, but back to the Rurik Museum. I'm just so impressed that you know about that. I've visited it many times.
Oh, great.
I cannot recommend it enough, you guys. So you're so clever to have found it, and you won't be sorry, people. You got to go and see it.
So somebody asked what the difference is between my book and Helmrich's book, and we both had a passion, and his was to walk all of New York City, and he walked all 5 boroughs. Mine was, I only took on Manhattan, the original Manhattan grid, but mine was a passion project to help the small businesses. And I never believed I would actually finish and walk 155 streets. And I continue to walk every single day now, in addition to delivering your books if you live in Manhattan. I am always rewalking because, as you know, places, unlike the 2 lovely guests we have tonight, places open and close on a daily basis. Not everyone gets to be around for as many decades as the 2 of you have been. So I think our books and our motivation and everything about it is very different. And New York is a big place, and I think there's room for all of us. And I thought he was amazing, and so sad that he had passed away. Okay, Mitchell, I'm ready for you. I had the lovely pleasure during COVID of having a nice long conversation with Mitchell. Unfortunately for both of these people, they had to be on the phone. We couldn't meet in person. And tonight is actually the first time I'm seeing you. So that, Chandra, you and I met, but I hadn't met Mitchell. So this is fun. And when you first said hello to me, it didn't even occur to me that that was who it was saying hello. So anyway, now we'll have to meet in person, have a drink, get down the hatch. I love your story, and this is why I was always motivated to keep walking. Somebody once asked me in one of my Zoom talks a few months ago, what made me keep going every day? And this woman said, Betsy, we all have dreams, we all have passions, we all have ideas. We get up in the morning and maybe we do them, maybe we don't. She said, you got up every day for 6 years, every day of the week. And you walked and you walked and you walked and you got to your goal. to the end of your journey. And she said, what kept you going? And what kept me going were the people. And it was just such an honor to meet all of you and to speak to you and to hear your stories, and then to be given permission to share them on both my website and then in my book. So thanks to all of the businesses, and the motivation behind it all is to get all of you who are listening and to tell your friends and family members to visit these places. These places only survive if we help them to survive. And that is my goal. So Mitchell was a college student at NYU, and I think probably swirling around in your head for a long time was, gee, wouldn't it be fun to open a bar? But how many people actually do that, especially when they're a young 20-something-year-old? So Mitchell initially went to Wall Street, and the reason that I mention that is I met so many people who started in the business world, were on Wall Street, but in the back of their minds, they always wanted a flower shop or a bar or a restaurant or whatever it was. And kudos to all of you who followed your dream and followed your passion, left the business world, learned what you needed to learn, and you'll tell your story how you did everything in that bar, and opened something that has now just celebrated last September, right? The end of September, you celebrated 30 years on West 4th Street. And I love the fact that you say people come back and tell you that they met their wife there, they met a best friend there, whatever it is 30 years later or 25 years later, but that the young people, that NYU, they never disappoint. Those students keep coming. And so that's nice that you can keep going. So Mitchell, please share your story, say hello to everyone.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mitch Banchek, and I was one of those NYU students. I went to NYU from 1980 to 1984. And while I was at NYU, I worked at a lot of bars and restaurants in the village, some that are still there. One of them was the Bitter End. I was a bartender there for years. Before that, it was the Village Gate, which unfortunately closed. That was an amazing place to work. I also worked at Caliente Cab Company on Bleecker and 7th. And I worked my way through college in those places. And I got a finance degree from NYU. And as Betsy said, I went to Wall Street for several years. I did well there, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't see myself as a corporate 9-to-5, sit behind a desk kind of guy. So I wound up going back into the restaurant business. And I also combined my knowledge of hospitality with my knowledge of real estate, which I had been doing on and off as a college student, and then again in investing when I was working on Wall Street. And I became a restaurant broker that specialized in restaurants. And I got a feel for the market, buying and selling restaurants, mostly in Greenwich Village, where I continued to live. And I found, I came across a deal that was a restaurant called Trip on 4, which was a sushi restaurant on West 4th Street that I really thought would be a great NYU bar. And I took note of the fact that uptown, there were a lot of bars that catered to a younger clientele by doing happy hours and ladies' nights and winging beer specials. And there was really nothing like that in the village, which was right, in the middle of, where NYU was right in the middle of the village. And there was the largest private institution, undergraduate program in the country. And there really weren't servicing the students with these kind of fun, young places. So I took a shot. I was very nervous because down the hatch, it's down half a flight and you can't really even see inside from the street. And so myself and two of my college roommates built the place ourselves. We didn't think it was going to be that difficult to do. And as most construction projects sort of evolve, it was incredibly difficult to do. And it took us way longer than we thought, but, we persevered and we opened in actually October 1st in 1991. We hired some of our friends to run the kitchen and to be the bartenders. And it was successful from day one. We really opened the place on a shoestring. In fact, we only had enough money to buy one cash register. And after the first night, we realized that we needed a second cash register. We basically took all the proceeds and went down to buy a second cash register, and the place has been really busy since we opened. And it's been a fairly steady business for 30 years because not only do we have all the NYU students, we have a lot of tourists. And Down the Hatch over the years has become somewhat iconic because a lot of people have been going there from various parts of the city. People come down from Columbia University, and it's a big college hangout, and it's very well known. Out of the rest of my places that I have, it continues to be the most well known place, even though it's the smallest and sort of halfway underground. It's been a very good run for us. At the beginning, it was an incredible amount of work. I was the manager, the bartender, and the maintenance guy for 13 months. I was working 100-hour weeks. And after the 13th month, I wound up buying another restaurant on the Upper East Side. And since then, I've opened up a total of 8 places in the city, Down the Hatch plus 7 more. And we've also expanded to Chicago, and I'm about to open up my 15th restaurant now in Charleston, where I am at the moment. We're building 2 places down here, and New York City continues to be my home, and it's a difficult place to do business, but it's an incredible place to do business. And Down the Hatch gets a fairly decent amount of notoriety because of its longevity and the amount of people that have gone through there. We've gotten write-ups in various publications and online from people that used to go to Down the Hatch. They're now writing for various magazines or newscasters. We've been on the news a couple of times, and it's been very gratifying. We actually like the yoga studio. We also own the building. We were able to buy the building in 2003 from the owner, who had become a friend of mine and was very involved with with the success of Down the Hatch. He was always sort of in my corner and doing anything he could to help me out. And then when my lease was coming to an end, he made it very easy for me to buy the building, and I'll never forget him for that. So that was really kind of a nice parting gesture on his part, and it's been great. It's been great.
Mitchell, would you like to talk a little bit about how you had to pivot and how you got through COVID with so many bars and restaurants, and just to share some of the backstories that people might not be aware of that business owners went through and are continuing to go through?
Sure. Yeah, COVID was obviously a very difficult time for everybody in New York. I've been fortunate in that I've been able to purchase most of the buildings that my bars and restaurants are in, and the banks were very helpful in working with us to defer mortgage payments. The places that I don't own, we asked the landlords to defer rent payments, which they did. We felt obligated to pay some of our staff even when we were closed, because a lot of our staff didn't have access to unemployment benefits. So we took care of them, which was financially very difficult until the federal government came in with the PPP money, which was really a lifeline for the business. And then the city allowed us to have outdoor seating in the streets, the open restaurant program, which was another lifeline, because we were actually able to serve our customers safely without them coming inside. And we took advantage of that as much as we could, all my places. And it was, it was really, we couldn't have done it without those things. And it's now business is really back to what it was pre-COVID, and we were able to continue to keep the seating outside, which is really a nice benefit. And we think that it makes the city more lively and safer at night. So that's pretty much how we did it.
And are you getting any feedback about not wanting to keep these outdoor places going? Because there's a lot of controversy about it, and now that they forbid propane for the winter,
yeah,
all the issues that you keep having to fight hard to stay where
Yep.
you are.
Yeah, like I said, New York City is not an easy place to do business, but they do allow electric heat outside. So, we run electric heaters out there, and for the most part, the program has a lot of support. The city wants to keep it. The businesses want to keep it. Most of the residents want to keep it. There are, of course, some people that don't like it, and they're vocal. But it looks like we are going to get to keep it for sure until the end of 2022. And then an organization that I helped start called the New York City Hospitality Alliance, which advocates for the hospitality industry, is working with the city to come up with a program that's going to be palatable to everybody.
Well, that's great. That's good to know about. So Linnell, questions or comments that you would like to share?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's so great to hear about your incredible businesses and thriving as best you can during this climate of very strange things going on. But we as a neighborhood are so grateful because your places are what keep us all sort of part of the loop and thriving as together. So Mitchell, I was thinking I haven't got any. I've got a couple of hands in the chat, but let me just go to this question. We loved seeing on your website that you were collecting community memories to celebrate your anniversary. Is that still going on, Mitchell?
No, the anniversary was about a month ago.
Tell me what your favorite memory has been.
Mine personally, or the stories that I heard?
The stories that you heard, and your own, sure, of course.
Okay, so we were I was at a closing at a bank, closing on a property, in a large conference room with about 15 people around it, and a very distinguished gentleman, walks in gray hair in a suit. Everybody kind of stopped what they were doing, and he said, "Who's Mitchell Banchik?" And I raised my hand, and he said, "I need to talk to you outside." And I thought for sure there was something wrong with the deal and the building wasn't going to close. I walk out into the hallway. He goes, "I want to shake your hand. I met my wife down the hatch." And he shook my hand, gave me a hug.
Oh,
that's great.
That was really
that's
sweet.
A good memory.
Yeah, great memory. We also, when I was bartending down there, we had a lot of celebrities come in, which was really cool for, 20-something-year-old. And we actually have had several people work for me that went on to become famous, which is kind of nice.
That's so great. Really good. Yes, we do have a couple of questions in the chat here. So now Lisa's asking, is there one particular neighborhood that is richest in the small, interesting businesses? Betsy, that's a question for you. And I'm prejudiced about it, but
well, in the most in the smallest perimeter of space is definitely the East Village. 7th, 8th, 9th Street. Every single place is a small business. There are no chains there, and you can find something for children. You can find a sake shop, all kinds of restaurants and bars, obviously, vintage stores, men's clothing, women's clothing, there's hair salons, tattoo parlors, and then St. Mark's, which is part of 8th Street, has so much going on, and every kind of ethnic food that you could imagine is there. So I would say most concentrated area. If you only had a few hours to walk and you didn't want to walk a lot, I mean, and you now, what would you say, Linnell?
Well, I agree with you, but also the West Village and Greenwich Village. But boy, oh boy, on the streets you just mentioned, 7th, 8th, 9th, there are so many cool little shops. And it's funny, I was just reading in the New Yorker today, the big headline in the New Yorker, my news feed was, will supply chain ruin Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever other holidays you celebrate? And the answer is it shouldn't, because you should be able to go to one of those beautiful little stores in the East Village or in the West Village or the Lower East Side, NoHo, and you'll find things that you will love, and they're amazing.
And they're scattered up, I mean, I can attest, every single street from First to 155th Street has something. It does. And
It does.
a fun fact though, I had walked 98 streets, and when I got to the west side of 98th Street, from Central Park West all the way to the Hudson River, there is nothing commercial whatsoever. There's not a parking garage, there's not a school, a firehouse. It's the only block up until then that has absolutely nothing but residential. So that was a fun fact. And
Wow, cool fun fact.
we have a friend, very dear friends, who live on 98, and she said, oh my gosh, I've lived here for years. I had no idea, because nobody ever thinks about something like that.
Yeah, that's
So,
really
yeah.
interesting. Let's see here. Would you like to talk a little bit about Sutton clocks and Lulu button?
Oh, is that because you've heard me tell the story I'm asking this person.
This is a question from Mary Friend Loftus, who would like to
Okay.
know.
Well, my mom, who's 90 years old, always says, don't forget to tell the Lulu button story. So forgive me for anybody who's heard that, but that's really funny that someone asked that question, but I'll do it quickly for those who've already heard it. Roz is the owner of Lulu buttons, and he's from Iran. And when he was 17 years old, he quietly applied to university in America and got in and went to his mom and said he wanted to go to America to study. And his mom said, where is America? And he came from absolutely no money. They had absolutely nothing. His mom didn't read or write. And she took her few little valuables the next morning without telling him and sold them on the street, and came back and gave him this, opened his hand and put in this little bit of money and said, you go follow your dream. And he came to America in the 1970s, got his engineering degree from Brooklyn Tech, and he was working for a construction company on Fifth Avenue. And one day during lunch, he went inside a button shop and he was looking around and discovered these lovely buttons, and he wanted to buy a bunch of them. And the person behind the counter said it would be several weeks before they could get them to him. And he looked at the buttons and he said, I can make these. And he literally quit his job and he started making buttons. And he has this tiny little unpretentious shop on 38th Street near where Lord and Taylor used to be. And he's been there over 30 years. He makes buttons for the Metropolitan Opera, for New York City Ballet. He said there's pretty much no Broadway show that he hasn't made buttons for. He makes buttons out of real stones, that each button is $50,000. But he never tells anybody any of these stories. And it's someone who works with him, who I spoke with, who kind of let the cat out of the bag and told me all these things about him. And I love him and I'm friendly with him, but he's very discreet, I guess. So one of his fun stories is when Meghan Markle was getting married, somebody had come into the shop and ordered very, very expensive buttons. And all that he remembered hearing was that the person said, we have to go to Chicago and then to LA and then to London. And we're stopping in New York first. And they ordered these buttons. And the morning of the wedding to Meghan and Prince Harry, he had the TV on and he heard just kind of out of the, like he was walking around, he said, and he had the TV on and he heard somebody say something about stopping in New York and going to Chicago, LA, and then to London. And he looked and it was Meghan Markle's mom wearing a dress that had his buttons on it. So he was very excited because the people who were purchasing the buttons and making the dress never told him who they were for. So that was kind of that's a fun story. And something that I promised Ariel that I would share with everybody, I loved Chandra and Mitchell that you were able to figure out how to keep going and that you knew how to work the system and that you could bring your people in with you, but not everybody was that fortunate. And there's a wonderful, wonderful, tiny, less than 400 square feet, chocolate and licorice, European licorice shop on 55th Street across from the city center. She's been there over 30 years, Myzel's, M-Y-Z-E-L. And I befriended her, and I was checking in on her all the time during COVID. She's in my first book, her story. She came from Poland under asylum, spoke no English, came by herself in her 20s, worked 2 jobs, ultimately was able to buy this tiny little sweet shop in 1991. And she goes in every single day. And sometimes she has some young Polish girls who help her, but otherwise, with her mom, she had brought her mom over at one point, and her mom lived with her, and they ran it together. And then sadly, a few years ago, her mom passed away. But this lovely woman, Camilla, is in that shop every single day doing the best she can. And through COVID, she was just devastated. She didn't know what to do. And then she would try to go to the store and open it when she was allowed to, but it was a street that had hotels on it, and the city was bringing the homeless people there. And she said outside her shop, all kinds of terrible things were happening, and she was petrified, and she had no one there to protect her, but she kept going, she kept doing it. A few weeks ago, she was served papers for $280,000 from her landlord for her rent. Now, she has a lovely gentleman who is working pro bono with her as her attorney for years, and he had been trying to contact the landlord, who was one of the biggest real estate owners in New York, and apparently has not a very good reputation. But we looked him up, or the company up, and they're worth $3 billion. So he was going after this woman, in her 60s from Poland. All she wants to do is put smiles on people's faces and give them chocolate and candy that she makes in the littlest kitchen in all of New York. And Mitchell, you can appreciate what the littlest kitchen in all of New York must look like. So anyway, she called me and she said, Betsy, what can I do? I need your help. And she was crying. I said, you know what? I'm on this for you. I said, I've never reached out. I've never asked a favor, but I'm going to do it today. I sent 6 texts to people on television, people, the New York Post, people who had written about me or had me on TV, Gail Brewer, Eric Botcher, who tonight is officially going to be city councilman. Every single person I reached out to responded immediately and said, how can we help? And it was suggested that I start her on a GoFundMe page, which I did, having no idea how one does that. We're almost at $9,000, I think now, which doesn't begin to help her. But anyway, New York came together, and every time she was featured on Fox News, New York One, NBC twice, CBS, and this article in the New York Post, people came. There was a line. I was there all the time trying to help her. And there was a line out the door every single day. New Yorkers wanted to help. New Yorkers came together for this lovely woman. So it's a wonderful story. It doesn't have an ending yet, happy or not happy. It's, they still haven't helped her. They emailed her one day and said, stop shaming us. Can you imagine? So anyway, we're all trying to help her, and a very big name who's an influencer, he got involved, and Humans of New York, if you know those books, Brandon Stanton, I had the pleasure of meeting him, and he's helping me to help her. So, and once we resolve things and we feel like she's going to be okay and nobody can touch her and her rent, then we will big time go with the GoFundMe page for her. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up too much. I will stop now, but that's a New York story that's worth sharing. And it's everything about who I am and why I do what I do is to help these small businesses. So I kind of beg all of you to buy some candy and go to Myzel's or call her and send it to a friend.
That's an amazingly beautiful story. It really is. And it's emblematic of how we can come together, how we can help each other, and why small businesses mean so much. They're just the fabric of our city. They're beautiful and wonderful, and they all have a good story behind them. We also wanted to ask, Lisa was wondering, how did you decide what and whom to include in this particular book, or in both of your books, Betsy?
the first book was the 1980s and older. Both books are businesses that have stood the test of time. It was very difficult. It was very difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Some of the stories that I knew that resonated with me, it had a lot to do with what photos I had, who I could reach. I reached out to so many people because it was COVID. So I couldn't go in, I couldn't see anyone, I couldn't take photographs. So if I could have these wonderful conversations like I had with Mitchell and Chandra, you know, that was terrific. And I kind of knew what chapters I wanted, so I knew the themes, so then I had to go that way. And then also I didn't want to have too many in one neighborhood. So you know, it was a balancing act. And could I write 3 more books about all these places that, you know, I didn't get to cover? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
we hope you will continue this great quest of yours. I'm also just gonna make a little comment from Judith, who says, because of Betsy's book, my walking partner and I went to the button shop, and the man there told us his lovely story, the story of his history. And she comments, what a wonderful adventure. So that's great.
I mean, that's why I do what I do. So thank you. That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
So happy.
It's great. And back to you, Mitchell. Someone wants to know, who were some of the celebs that you were talking about earlier?
As customers?
Or I believe that customers or people who maybe worked for you?
People who work for me are a woman named Liz Tuccillo, who went on to write for Sex and the City, and she wrote He's Just Not That Into You. A guy named Matt Lillard, who he's an actor. He was like Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, and had a whole bunch of like really good roles. He worked for me for a while. In terms of celebs that went there, Matthew Broderick was there, Kiefer Sutherland was there, Ethan Hawke, a whole bunch of famous athletes, Matt Dillon, I'm trying to think, Harrison Ford.
So great.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna wrap up now, I think, unless anybody else has another question that you'd like to ask us. I would like to ask Betsy one last question, and that is, what's next for you and for all the Manhattan Sideways folks?
That's $1 million question. I am forever going to keep my website as up to date as possible. Right now, it's a huge challenge because the city is changing so rapidly. We also had done 40 some odd podcast interviews with different business owners, which stopped during COVID. So maybe I will keep that going.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. But right now, I love promoting the book and hearing stories that somebody went to Lulu Buttons and Sutton Clocks, and that makes me so happy. And I hope you'll all get a chance to look through the second book and be inspired to go to some of these art places, theater, dance, music, etc. And 3 Lives bookstore on West 10th Street, because if a lot of people are from this neighborhood, they have copies of the book. The most exciting thing to me are all the places that have the book, and that in turn it's making money for them if you purchase the book from them. So I'm always happy to help you and get it to you from my own apartment, but I also love to support the other businesses.
3 Lives, we love 3 Lives and all small bookstores. But you can also order straight from Betsy if you want.
Oh, and Integral Yoga has it as well. Sorry, Chandra. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Has it.
So go check out that shop and you can get it there. Absolutely. Yeah.
Chandra, one last thing. What's it like what has it been like for Integral to be both an institute and a store? Does one support the other?
Well, the bookstore, the shop as we call it, it's kind of like a museum shop and a church shop. So yes, they do support each other. There are so many amazing books to support your journey on the spiritual path. and excellent yoga props. And so people were ordering, and we were shipping or having curbside pickup as everyone was practicing at home. They needed props. And so we sold a lot of bolsters and blankets. We sell jade mats, which New York Times Wirecutter just named one of their 2 best mats.
Cool.
So, and the shop also serves as the reception area. So prior to COVID, that was such a happy, beautiful place of people seeing each other and greeting each other, coming in to check in for their classes upstairs, lots of hugs, lots of wonderful conversations there. And I hope to see that happen again as the openings gradually increase.
Chandra, can I just, excuse me, interrupt and say, what's your next chapter? Because you are no longer the executive director, correct?
Yes, I am moving back. I'm coming full circle. I started as a student and a teacher, and now once again, I'm a student and a teacher. I have, since becoming a teacher in 1998, I have taught at least once every week, and sometimes a lot more. So yeah, I continue. I teach a Zoom class every Tuesday morning at 9:15. I usually teach at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays, and it's only the rarest of wonderful other events like this, which would get me to ask for a sub. So I will just do that and continue to learn. I'm going to take more teacher trainings now that I'm not working there so much, and become a more advanced teacher. So I will always be a part of Integral Yoga. It is one of the most authentic and genuine and important places that I've ever been so fortunate to be a part of.
Gosh.
And everyone is welcome. So, and there's so many ways to access it. Zoom class, you can turn your camera off. We don't even see you, and we'll teach you an amazing yoga class.
Thank you all so very much. I'm definitely gonna be coming to a yoga class, Chandra Jo.
Okay, get in
Thanks
touch.
a
Let me
million.
know.
Yeah, all 3 of you, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been great to learn about your businesses, and really great to learn about Betsy, more about Betsy and her mission to really help keep the fabric of our beautiful city together with all these wonderful places you can go and meet and shop and enjoy. Yeah, our city is all the better for all of them. So thank you to Betsy, to Chandra Jo, and to Mitchell. And we hope to see you all on the side streets. See you sideways. Take care, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
Good
you.
night.
Bye, thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mitchell and Chandra.
Thank you, Betsy. Thanks, Mitchell and Linnell and Sam. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Take good care.
Bye.